Imagine for a second that you are walking into this bustling, just incredibly energetic environment.
Oh yeah, you can instantly feel the vibe just stepping through the doors.
Right. The air is practically vibrating. You look around and you see these whiteboards totally covered in packed calendars.
Everyone is moving fast, talking fast.
Exactly. There's this constant, almost dizzying stream of really encouraging reports flying across desks. You hear the chatter of like a dozen different projects being launched simultaneously.
The funding is steady, the graphics are slick, the branding is just flawless.
Yes, the room just feels alive. There is this undeniable, intoxicating momentum, and you just want to be part of it.
It is entirely contagious.
Yeah.
But, and this is the catch, if you stand there long enough and the noise of the crowd dies down just a little bit, there's this quiet question.
Yeah, a slightly unsettling question that lingers right in the back of your mind. You start to wonder, are we actually measuring effectiveness here, or are we just measuring motion?
That right there is the existential crisis of almost every modern organization. But it becomes particularly acute, when the organization is dealing with matters of the soul. We have this profound societal addiction to activity.
We really do. If dust is being kicked up, we just assume a house is being built.
Exactly. We like things to be highly visible, to be categorized neatly into a spreadsheet. We want it charted on a quarterly graph so we can hand it to a board of directors and say, look, we did a good job.
Which is the perfect entry point for our deep dive today. We are pulling apart a really comprehensive and honestly quite challenging document simply titled 026 Measuring Mission Effectiveness.
It is a heavy hitter of a text.
It really is. The mission for our conversation today is to unpack this deeply uncomfortable tension sitting right at the center of mission and ministry work.
The core question it wrestles with is fascinating.
Right. It asks, how do you evaluate real, enduring spiritual fruit without, reducing flesh and blood people to mere data points?
And conversely, how do you prevent a deeply personal, sacred mission from morphing into just another cold corporate ledger?
The context surrounding this document makes it vital for anyone paying attention to how modern communities function.
Because we are navigating an era of absolute information overload, driven almost entirely by what the tech world calls vanity metrics.
Vanity metrics. We've been culturally conditioned by social media, by corporate culture, to just believe that a larger crowd automatically equals a mature, healthy community.
We just assume that more activity, more events, more noise inherently means more impact.
Yeah, and the text we're looking at throws a massive wrench into that assumption. And that's why this matters to you, listening right now.
Absolutely. You might be leading a team at a nonprofit, or maybe managing a community outreach project.
Or maybe you are just trying to evaluate the real, lasting impact of your own life's work. Regardless of your context, learning to distinguish between mere activity and genuine transformation is a survival skill.
If we don't learn how to measure the right things, we will inevitably exhaust ourselves chasing the wrong ones.
Well said. So, to even begin measuring the right things, the source material insists we have to confront our natural psychology first.
Right, we have to understand why human beings naturally gravitate toward counting the wrong things in the first place. The text introduces a phrase that I found incredibly haunting.
Oh, I know the one.
The seduction of vague success.
The seduction of vague success, that phrasing is just brilliant. It perfectly captures that human tendency we all share to trust the things that can be easily and immediately seen.
While completely ignoring the things that have to be discerned slowly over time.
Right, so we count attendance at an event. We count the dollars given in a campaign. We count how many volunteer hours were logged.
And why do we do that? Because they are right there. You don't have to guess.
You can put them in a beautiful pie chart on page 1 of a monthly report, and everyone feels a rush of dopamine.
But that dopamine hit is the trap. In the corporate world, if you have a lot of activity but no actual results, the profit and loss statement exposes the illusion pretty quickly.
Yeah, a company goes bankrupt if motion doesn't lead to revenue.
Exactly. But in the realm of mission, ministry, or community work, the text offers a really severe warning. It says ministries can actually provide moral cover for busyness.
Moral cover for busyness. Wow. Because the work is framed as noble or sacred, people can remain completely overwhelmed and busy for years.
Years and years without ever being forced to name the deeper, more terrifying question.
Which is anything actually changing in the lives of the people we are serving?
Right. Visible activity becomes a comforting blanket. It's significantly easier to schedule another massive awareness campaign than to sit down in a quiet room and honestly examine whether the last campaign actually shifted anyone's fundamental worldview.
Okay, let's unpack this idea that motion does not equal direction. It brings to mind this image of running on a treadmill at the gym.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, you have your headphones in, you are sweating profusely, you're breathing hard, your heart rate is totally in the aerobic zone.
Your legs are moving incredibly fast.
Yeah, and the digital display right in front of your face is giving you all this positive feedback. It shows you've gone 5 miles, you've burned 600 calories, you are hitting all your metrics.
But if you step off the machine and look down, you haven't actually left the room.
Exactly. You are in the exact same geographic location you were an hour ago. You've exerted a massive amount of energy, and you have the data to prove you worked hard, but you haven't actually traveled anywhere.
That visual captures the text critique perfectly. You are generating a high volume of output, but there is zero outcome in terms of reaching a new destination.
Mm-hmm.
In a mission context, this reliance on numerical growth can intensely flatter the ego of the leaders.
Oh, for sure. A steeply rising attendance chart creates this intoxicating illusion of divine blessing or strategic genius.
The leaders look at the packed room and think, well, we must be doing something right. Even to the actual spiritual or emotional formation of the people sitting in those chairs is incredibly shallow.
Or fragile.
Yeah.
Or even regressing, right. But I have to push back a little here, though, because I think a lot of people listening might feel the same way.
Sure, go for it.
Isn't excitement and a packed calendar at least a good sign? I mean, if you throw a community dinner and the room is absolutely packed, people are laughing, they are showing up, they are engaged, why is the text so wary of that enthusiasm?
It's a fair question.
Right, because isn't a baseline of passion and critical mass a prerequisite for any successful movement? I'd rather have a packed, enthusiastic room than an empty, depressed one.
The source material actually anticipates that exact defense. It isn't arguing that enthusiasm is inherently toxic or that an empty room is somehow a sign of holiness.
Okay, good.
The theological and philosophical correction the text makes is that excitement is a fine starting point, but it operates as a psychological mask.
It hides the vast gap between perception and reality.
Exactly. Human enthusiasm is notoriously fleeting. It responds to novelty, to charismatic speaking, to good music, to a sense of crowd psychology.
Yeah, the text points out that a ministry can throw a massive, celebrated event, fill a room to capacity, and yet never actually follow up to ask if those people are actively obeying the tenets of their faith after they drive out of the parking lot.
It's the profound danger of mistaking visibility for impact. The crowds might simply be gathering for the spectacle, for the social networking, or just the sheer energy of the room.
Right. If a program is hyperactive for a decade, but leaves the deep, hidden architecture of a person's character completely untouched, that program is just generating noise.
So the goal is to avoid the trap of throwing a party and calling it a revolution.
That is exactly it. We have to stop celebrating the sheer size of the crowd while ignoring the individual's actual grounded growth.
Which brings us to a massive fork in the road.
Yeah, because if measuring the wrong things, like just counting heads or scanning social media metrics, is as dangerous as the text suggests, a lot of people might conclude that the act of evaluation itself is the problem.
Right, they ask, should we just stop measuring altogether?
And many well-meaning leaders take that exact exit ramp. The source refers to this phenomenon as metric fear.
Metric fear. When leaders witness the damage caused by shallow corporate vanity metrics infiltrating their sacred spaces, they often swing the pendulum violently to the opposite extreme.
They adopt this romantic, but ultimately false idea that evaluation is fundamentally unspiritual.
They retreat into total ambiguity. They opt for the emotional safety of unexamined sincerity over the sharp discomfort of honest evaluation.
They start relying on phrases like, well, you can't put a number on what God is doing, or we just trust the process.
Yeah, they feel like putting a metric on a spiritual mission is somehow secularizing it, dragging the divine down into a corporate boardroom. It feels gross to them.
But the author of the source text argues vehemently against that retreat. The document posits that measured is not a secular corporate concept that the church accidentally borrowed from Wall Street.
Rather, measured is fundamentally a discipleship word.
I really want to highlight that. A discipleship word. How does the act of auditing or measuring become a spiritual discipline? Because for a lot of people, an audit feels like the IRS, not a spiritual awakening.
The argument rests on the definition of discipleship itself. A disciple is a learner, someone being actively formed, examined, corrected, and grown.
So to measure something is simply to declare that it actually matters to you.
Exactly. The text traces a deep historical biblical instinct for fruitfulness.
Mm.
It points to Jesus famously stating, "By their fruits you will know them."
The text emphasizes that Jesus didn't commend religious intensity, he didn't commend the volume of someone's prayers, and he certainly didn't commend institutional visibility.
He explicitly said that the tangible fruit of a person's life is the ultimate test of their reality.
The document also points to historical figures like Nehemiah.
Yeah, before Nehemiah attempted to rebuild the ruined walls of Jerusalem, he didn't just run out into the rubble with a pile of bricks in blind enthusiasm.
No, he spent days silently surveying the damage, measuring the gaps, assessing the reality of the ruin.
Similarly, Moses had to structure responsibility and measure the capacity of his leaders so the entire mission wouldn't collapse under its own weight.
It's the absolute refusal to build a foundation based on assumption. You have to be willing to look at reality, even if the reality is bleak.
But there is a massive philosophical tension lurking right here.
Oh, absolutely. Because we are talking about evaluating human efforts, charting our strategies, measuring our programs, but in the context of faith and mission, we don't actually control the ultimate outcome.
It's a paradox. We are held entirely accountable for our faithfulness, but we are simultaneously entirely not sovereign over the results.
So what does this all mean? The text names that exact paradox as the central tension of all mission work.
Christian mission, according to the source, is never a human project alone. It is always animated by divine agency.
Like the Apostle Paul captured when he wrote, "I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth."
The implication is massive. No human metric, no matter how sophisticated, can ever fully capture the totality of what the divine is doing.
And the text warns of two disastrous extremes here. On one side, if you emphasize accountability without acknowledging the mystery of divine agency, the mission degenerates into a cold, lifeless machine.
Leaders fall into the trap of believing they can engineer spiritual outcomes if they just tweak the algorithm, fix the branding, or find the perfect sociological strategy.
They start treating human beings like raw materials in an optimization funnel. You know, if we send 3 emails, host 2 dinners, and play this specific song, we will output 1 mature community member.
Which is a profound theological contradiction. It depersonalizes people into mere data points.
Yeah, and the text points out that Jesus consistently defied this kind of mechanical thinking. He never treated people as metrics to be maximized.
He would stop an entire journey for a single marginalized individual. He spent hours engaged in a complex, deeply personal conversation with a single woman at a well.
An interaction that would be considered an absolute failure of time management by modern efficiency standards.
It would never scale.
Never. But on the other side of the spectrum, if you emphasize mystery without maintaining accountability, the mission dissolves into vague, directionless fog.
Leaders use spiritual language to hide their own incompetence, excusing their lack of effectiveness or laziness as simply waiting on divine timing.
So the tightrope walk is to measure with absolute rigor, but to measure the right things, holding tightly to both our human accountability and the mystery of how change actually happens.
Right.
If we aren't just counting the number of heads in a room, and we aren't just looking at the bottom line of the offering plate, what specifically are we supposed to be looking for?
To answer that, the source breaks the evaluation process down into 5 specific dimensions.
Okay, let's get into those.
The first 2 of these dimensions focus entirely, almost obsessively, on the people themselves. The first dimension is evaluating participation.
Now, on the surface, participation sounds an awful lot like the attendance metrics we just finished criticizing.
It does sound similar, but the text draws an incredibly sharp, almost severe line between the 2 concepts. It delineates a critical psychological and behavioral difference between mere presence and actual participation.
Ah.
The question a leader must ask is not just who came to the building today. The deeper question is, who among the people in the building is actively moving from a posture of observation to a posture of ownership?
Right, because presence is simply occupying physical space. You can sit in a comfortable chair, consume the music, listen to the speaker, drink the free coffee, and leave the building entirely untouched and uninvested.
You were just a consumer of a religious product.
Exactly. The historical parallel the text draws here is striking. Jesus drew massive crowds, thousands of people at a time, but he never once confused the crowd with his actual disciples.
In fact, when his teachings became demanding or uncomfortable, the vast majority of the crowd just abandoned him.
Participation asks a totally different set of questions. Who actually comes back to help clean up the room? Who is willing to carry the emotional weight of an another struggling member.
Who is actively serving the poor in their neighborhood, who is genuinely praying for the community.
A healthy ministry, according to this framework, is never a stage performance where a handful of paid professionals do all the heavy lifting while a passive audience watches and critiques.
It must be a living, breathing body where individual members are activated into their own agency.
It's the metric of shifting identity. You are measuring the transition from a consumer who asks, "What does this community do for me?" to a contributor who asks, "What am I called to do for this community?"
And that shift leads directly into the second core dimension of the people, which is evaluating discipleship growth.
If participation is about the level of engagement, discipleship growth is about the depth of internal formation. The core question is, are these people actually taking on the character traits of Christ?
And the text highlights just how maddeningly difficult this is to measure, largely because of the very nature of human transformation. Real growth is agonizingly slow.
It is often entirely hidden from public view. It doesn't announce its arrival with a dramatic PR campaign or viral social media posts.
The text gives examples of what this fruit actually looks like in real life. It's not about someone shouting the loudest in a meeting.
Right. It's about someone demonstrating quicker repentance when they hurt their spouse. It's about developing a deeper, more agonizingly honest prayer life behind closed doors.
It's about the incredibly difficult, unglamorous work of pursuing reconciliation with an estranged family member after decades of silence.
You are looking for the gritty texture of sanctification. You simply cannot attach a neat, tidy numerical value to a proud CEO finally learning to ask their employees for forgiveness.
Or a teenager choosing moral integrity in a moment when they know for a fact no one is watching.
I have to pause here, though, because this is where the theory hits a massive wall in the real world.
It does.
This is where it gets really fascinating, but also intensely frustrating for anyone actually running an organization. The timeline for discipleship is glacial.
It's so slow.
If you are a leader, an executive director, or a pastor running a complex organization, you have massive pressures. You have stakeholders, you have donors, you have a board of directors expecting results.
They want to see the ROI.
Exactly. How on earth do you justify funding a program if the actual fruit might take a decade to materialize?
Right.
Imagine standing up at a fundraising banquet and saying, "We need $1 million this year, and if everything goes perfectly, in about 12 years, maybe 3 or 4 people will be marginally more patient with their kids."
They would laugh you out of the room.
It completely violates every single instinct of our instant gratification quarter-by-quarter culture.
It is a complete collision of paradigms, and the text doesn't shy away from that friction. It validates the immense pressure leaders feel by outlining what it calls a theology of hidden growth.
A theology of hidden growth.
The framework demands that leaders fundamentally shift their understanding of how the kingdom of God operates. The text uses agricultural imagery heavily here. The kingdom operates like a seed, not like a corporate sales funnel.
And seed work is inherently unglamorous. It is agonizingly slow.
The most critical phases of growth happen entirely hidden underground in the dark. It is deeply vulnerable to weather, to pests, to the environment, but, crucially, it possesses a biological life that a machine does not.
I love that. You can't scream at a planted seed to make it grow faster.
No, you really can't.
You can't threaten it with a bad performance review.
You can't optimize a seed with a new software platform or a better marketing consultant.
The environment can be cultivated, but the growth happens at its own pace.
This connects to a profound mandate in the source. A healthy community must learn to be patient with process.
It has to train its members and its donors to celebrate the long, quiet obedience in the same direction, rather than demanding an instant flashing spectacle.
If a ministry operates under the assumption that it needs immediate, linear, perfectly measurable outcomes for every single dollar spent or hour invested, they are going to profoundly misread the very nature of kingdom work.
They will eventually abandon the deep, slow, vital work of character formation simply because it isn't making the monthly dashboard look impressive enough.
So we have a clear picture of what we are looking for in the people themselves. We are guiding them from passive presence to active participation, and we are cultivating the patience required to watch for that slow, seed-like discipleship growth.
But individuals don't operate in a vacuum. How do the actual logistics, the physical operations of the organization, support this kind of slow growth?
That takes us into the next set of dimensions. The third and fourth dimensions shift the focus from the individuals to the mechanics of the organization itself. partnerships, and resource alignment.
Let's dig into partnerships first.
This section genuinely surprised me. The source issues a surprisingly stark, almost aggressive warning about partnerships.
It does. It points out that on paper, a partnership between two organizations can look incredibly strategic, like a total win-win, but underneath, it can be spiritually toxic and incredibly fragile.
The danger lies in the optics. A joint venture or a partnership can easily generate beautiful, glossy reports, it can move massive amounts of capital, and it can garner high praise from the public.
While quietly, behind the scenes, draining all actual trust between the groups involved.
The text is adamant that mission work must be profoundly relational long before it becomes logistical.
A genuinely healthy partnership cannot just be a transaction. It requires deep mutuality and a willingness to share actual burdens, not just share a logo on a flyer.
The text specifically calls out the history of cross-cultural missions here, issuing a massive warning against paternalism and cultural domination.
Which is a very necessary warning given the historical context. The history of global missions is incredibly complex. It's filled with genuine, profound sacrifice, but also heavily marred by colonial attitudes.
There is a long history of sending culture, often wealthy and Western, assuming that their specific cultural expressions of faith, their administrative structures, and their priorities are the universal standard.
And the text demands that we measure the hidden health of a partnership, not just the visible output.
When evaluating a partnership, the questions become invasive. Are the local indigenous voices actually being listened to and deferred to? Or are they merely being tolerated as a box-checking exercise?
Is real structural power being shared? Or does the entity with the money make all the final decisions?
Is the partnership cultivating durable, self-sustaining kingdom fruit? Or is it subtly producing a dynamic of perpetual dependency and local fatigue?
It's the massive difference between doing things with a community versus doing things to or for a community. The latter might look efficient, but it strips people of their agency.
Precisely. If interpersonal trust is disintegrating, if local leaders feel they have to hide their true opinions because the visiting organization holds all the purse strings, then the partnership is fundamentally unhealthy.
Regardless of how many massive stadium events they successfully co-host. Which brings us to the fourth dimension, and honestly, this is the one that forces everyone to look in the mirror. It might be the most exposing concept in the entire document: resource alignment.
The text makes an incredibly bold, definitive claim here. It states, without caveat, that budgets and calendars are moral documents.
Budgets and calendars are moral documents. They are the ultimate lie detectors of an organization.
Every single line item in a budget, every single hour blocked off on a calendar, is a concrete choice. And every choice carries a profound theological implication about what you actually believe.
It's the exact same principle as looking at an individual's personal bank statement. If you want to know what a person truly deeply values, you should completely ignore what they say they value.
Their words are aspirational. Look at their credit card statement and their weekly calendar.
Right. If a guy says he values his health above all else, but his credit card is full of fast food charges and his calendar shows zero time for exercise, the math reveals the truth.
What an organization repeatedly funds, staffs, and protects reveals what it actually trusts.
And churches and nonprofits are notoriously blind to this disconnect. A community might have a stunningly poetic mission statement etched in glass in their lobby about reaching the marginalized, pursuing justice, or prioritizing global missions.
But if you open their financial ledger and discover that 90% of their capital is being poured into internal maintenance, upgrading the sound system, maintaining an aging building,
and funding programs that only serve the comfort of the existing members,
there is a devastating misalignment. They are publicly confessing one radical mission, but they are financially funding a completely different insular reality.
You just touched on a key phrase from the text: maintenance. The document spends significant time warning leaders about the insidious nature of the maintenance mentality.
Now, the text is careful to note that maintenance, in and of itself, is not a sin. Physical buildings require care, administrative systems require order and funding to function.
The mortal danger arises when maintenance ceases to be a tool that serves the mission and slowly mutates to become the definition of the mission.
When a church or organization slips into this mentality, it begins spending all of its creative energy and resources protecting what it currently possesses, rather than taking the risks required to pursue what it was originally called to do.
The institution begins to operate as if its own sheer survival and continuity is the highest possible spiritual calling.
It's full survival mode. It becomes an exercise in preserving legacy structures at all costs, even if those structures haven't produced life in decades.
And the text doesn't just diagnose the problem, it offers the cure, which is painful. To fix a maintenance mentality, you have to start making agonizing choices.
The text specifically highlights the crippling cost of an organization saying yes to everything.
An inability to say no is the death knell of effectiveness. If an organization declares that every single program, every single tradition, and every single demographic is an equal priority, the mathematical reality is that nothing is actually a priority.
Indiscriminate yeses severely dilute the potency of a mission. Achieving true resource alignment requires the spiritual discipline of discernment, which inevitably leads to the painful but absolutely necessary grace of pruning.
A leadership team must cultivate the courage to say no to perfectly good, entirely respectable activities,
Sometimes even deeply beloved, multi-generational traditions.
simply so that the absolute most essential strategic work isn't starved of the resources it needs to survive.
So true.
So I want to synthesize where we are so far. We have evaluated the people looking for the shift from presence to participation and the slow, deep reality of discipleship growth.
We have evaluated the mechanics, examining the true power dynamics of partnerships, and forcing our budgets and calendars to align with our stated morals.
All of these elements, the people and the mechanics, are the engine. But what is the engine actually producing? That question forces us into the fifth and final dimension of evaluation.
This is the crescendo of the entire framework. To help leaders evaluate what is actually being produced, the text introduces a vital three-tier distinction that completely changes how you view a year-end report.
It demands that we separate all of our organizational outcomes into three distinct categories: output, outcome, and fruit.
We need to define these three layers with absolute clarity because in almost every board meeting I've ever been in, people conflate them constantly.
The conflation is where the illusion of success begins.
The first tier is output. This is the most basic level of measurement. It is simply a record of what we did. It's the physical activity completed.
For example, the output is hosting a 6-week discipleship workshop or organizing a drive that successfully distributes 500 meals to a local neighborhood.
It's the checklist. We planned the event happened, check the box, we did the thing.
The second tier moves one step deeper to outcome. The outcome is what happens because we did the thing. It is the direct, observable result of the output.
Returning to our examples, because we hosted the workshop, a survey shows that 50 participants are now reading their ancient texts more consistently.
Because we distributed the 500 meals, a previously ignored neighborhood reports feeling seen and valued by the organization.
So we have the action, and then the direct, immediate behavioral or emotional result of that action. But the framework doesn't let us stop there. We have to reach the third tier.
The third and ultimately most important tier is fruit. Fruit is the profound, systemic growth that reveals the actual life-giving presence of God in a person or a community.
It is significantly deeper and more enduring than a mere outcome. An outcome can be engineered, manipulated, or temporarily influenced by human effort.
Fruit must be grown over time. Following our example through to the end, the fruit is not just that people are reading more text.
The fruit is that, over the course of 3 years, the people engaging with that text have become tangibly, undeniably more humble.
They're demonstrably more obedient to their conscience. They are shockingly more patient with their rebellious teenagers.
The classic fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control actually becomes the visible default character of their daily lives.
But practically speaking, why is fruit so much harder for an organization to measure than an output or even an outcome? I can easily count the 500 meals on a clipboard.
Yeah, that's easy.
I can send out a Google form to survey the people about their reading habits and generate a percentage. But how do you capture a metric for humility? How do you put gentleness on a graph?
The difficulty lies in the source of the growth. Fruit, by definition, requires the dual processes of abiding and pruning. You cannot source an apple tree to bear fruit through sheer willpower or by shouting at it. You cannot manufacture spiritual fruit with a slick branding campaign, a celebrity endorsement, or a massive injection of venture capital.
It requires a sustained, living connection to the source of life, what the biblical texts describe as abiding in the vine.
The terrifying reality for a leader is that a massive mission project can be incredibly impressive to the outside world. It can generate multi-million-dollar budgets. It can produce flawlessly designed annual reports, meaning it has massive, undeniable output.
But if it does not eventually produce new faith, deeper holiness, or genuinely reconciled human relationships, it is fundamentally barren. It has produced no fruit.
It almost reads as a direct critique of the religious industrial complex.
Oh, it explicitly states, the most marketable ministries are not necessarily the most fruitful. That line stopped me in my tracks.
You can build a massive brand around a high output. You can run targeted ads for an outcome, but you cannot brand the slow, quiet emergence of fruit.
Which leads us directly into one of the most insidious traps outlined in the entire document.
If we accept that outputs are easily manipulated and fruit is hard to track, what happens to an organization that becomes highly competent, even world-class, at measuring the entirely wrong things?
This was the most gripping part of the document for me. The sheer danger of measuring the wrong things well. The text delivers this incredibly stark, haunting warning that competence can be a disguise.
It is a chilling organizational reality. A church, a nonprofit, or a mission agency can become absolutely fluent in the language of corporate reporting.
They can afford the best software, generate beautiful real-time digital dashboards, produce crisp, color-coded graphs,
And maintain perfect, down-to-the-minute attendance tracking. They present an image of being incredibly disciplined, data-driven, and highly accountable.
but spiritually speaking, they can remain completely illiterate. They have mastered the metrics of the world, but lost the ability to discern the movement of the soul.
To bring this abstract warning down to earth, the source shares an incredibly powerful illustrative anecdote called the two ministries.
Let's lay this out in detail because it perfectly captures the tension. Imagine two different church communities operating in the exact same city. The first church is the model of modern success. It is loud, it is bursting with energetic young people, and it is highly visible.
They have a state-of-the-art facility, their branding is indistinguishable from a high-end lifestyle company, and their social media reach is massive.
Their weekend numbers look spectacular. Everyone in the city knows their name.
But if you strip away the lights and look closely over a period of 5 years, the reality is grim.
The actual theological understanding of the members is an inch deep. The volunteer corps is completely, devastatingly burned out, constantly turning over because they are treated as free labor to pull off the weekend spectacle.
New believers are immediately recruited to execute logistical tasks. Parking cars, holding doors, but no one is actually walking alongside them to form them in the quiet habits of holiness, study, or contemplative prayer.
The organization is a blur of frantic, highly celebrated activity, but the spiritual fruit is utterly barren.
Then the text juxtaposes that with the second ministry. This church is quiet, it rarely draws outside attention.
They operate on a fraction of the budget, and their digital presence is almost non-existent. The music is a bit dated, the building has creaky floorboards.
But this community possesses an unshakable reputation in their specific neighborhood for deep, resilient care and absolute integrity.
The leaders there don't just preach from a stage. They walk into the messy living rooms of broken families and stay with them for years.
They spend agonizing hours mentoring young, flawed leaders over cheap coffee. Their numerical growth is painstakingly slow. They might only add 5 new people a year, but the people who are there endure.
When crisis hits, they don't leave. They know how to pray, they know how to repent when they hurt each other, and they stay committed.
The profound question the text forces upon the reader is, which of these two churches is actually more effective?
And the terrifying truth is that if you only look at a superficial, modern spreadsheet, you would pick the first church every single time.
Because our culture has deeply wired us to love what is loud, what is large, and what scales quickly.
But according to the metrics of the kingdom, the second church, the quiet, unpolished one, is the only one actually producing enduring generational fruit.
The implications of this go far beyond just misidentifying success. If we connect this to the bigger picture, measuring the wrong things doesn't just misinform the leadership of a ministry. It actually forms the souls of the people involved.
This is a profound psychological insight. The metrics a community chooses to elevate will literally shape the spiritual architecture of that community.
The age-old adage is true. What gets measured gets rewarded, and what gets rewarded gets reproduced.
If the leadership constantly praises and rewards high visibility and stage presence, you are literally training your entire congregation to view their faith as a performance. You are breeding narcissism and calling it leadership.
Exactly the danger. If a community rewards speed, efficiency, and rapid numerical growth above all else, they are systematically training their people to be deeply impatient with the slow, messy, inefficient work of actual human discipleship.
If the primary metric for a leader's success is just how many people they can gather in a room, the organization is training its people to completely ignore the private character of the leader.
The specific metrics you choose to put on your dashboard today will eventually dictate the culture, the morality, and the soul of the community you create tomorrow.
Okay, this is a heavy realization. We have thoroughly torn down the idol of vanity metrics. We recognize the profound danger of competence acting as a disguise.
We know, theoretically, that we need to look for slow, enduring fruit.
But practically speaking, how on earth do we actually implement this without losing our minds? We can't just throw out all the spreadsheets, stare at a newly planted seed all day, and write, "still growing" on a clipboard for 5 years.
We still have to function. We still need a system of evaluation.
We do, and thankfully, the text doesn't just leave us in a state of philosophical deconstruction. It offers a very grounded, practical framework for building what it calls a faithful evaluation rhythm.
The core of this rhythm is the deliberate, ongoing integration of quantitative data, the hard numbers, with qualitative data, the human stories.
It's the marriage of numbers and narrative.
They are mutually dependent. Numbers are incredibly useful because they show scale, they reveal consistency, and they expose macro patterns that a single story might miss. Numbers tell you definitively what is happening.
Stories, on the other hand, provide the depth, the meaning, and the human texture. Stories tell you why it's happening and what it actually means to the human heart.
If a leadership team relies exclusively on numbers, they eventually become cold, calculating, and dangerously corporate.
But if they rely exclusively on emotional stories, they become overly sentimental, prone to confirmation bias, and structurally unaccountable. You must have both elements constantly correcting and informing each other.
To make this hyper-practical, the text provides a fantastic concrete case study. It walks the reader through evaluating a hypothetical initiative called the Neighborhood Table Fellowship.
The premise is beautifully simple. Small teams of people commit to sharing regular, ongoing meals with marginalized families in their local area.
There is no big stage, no band, no massive budget, just a dinner table and a commitment to relationship.
The text then lays out 3 specific key performance indicators or KPIs to measure the effectiveness of this deeply relational ministry.
It's a brilliant example of measuring the seemingly unmeasurable. Let's break down those 3 KPIs. The first is the numeric metric.
The leaders track the raw number of households that are engaged consistently, and they define consistently strictly as sharing a meal at least twice a month.
It's not just a vanity count of how many unique individuals showed up to a massive block party once and never returned. It is a rigid count of ongoing consistency.
This vital metric grounds the entire ministry in reality. You might feel like you're doing great work, but the numbers force you to answer. Is anyone actually coming back to the table?
Then, to add depth, the second KPI is relational. They don't just track the sheer number of visits. They measure the percentage of participating households that have formed a consistent relational anchor over a 6-month period.
In plain terms, are the marginalized families seeing the exact same faces across the table month after month?
The psychological insight here is crucial. The text understands that genuine trust requires memory.
If a church treats this outreach like a corporate volunteer day, constantly rotating a new batch of well-meaning but unfamiliar volunteers through the neighborhood every single week, the community doesn't experience love.
They experience instability and treat the volunteers like a revolving door of social workers.
The relational metric ensures the ministry is actually building enduring trust, rather than just efficiently rotating volunteers through a religious checklist.
And then we reach the hardest one, the third KPI, spiritual. How do you measure the spiritual impact of a dinner?
The text suggests tracking documented, qualitative testimonies of actual spiritual movement over time. The leaders are listening for and writing down specific narratives of change.
Things like a neighbor expressing a sudden renewed curiosity about the scriptures, or tangible, real-world acts of forgiveness and reconciliation occurring within a previously fractured family.
It's not a percentage point. It's a documented, verifiable narrative of a transformed life.
Which perfectly illustrates how you can build a rigorous system to evaluate the deepest, most sacred aspects of human life without stripping them of their dignity.
To maintain this kind of healthy rhythm long-term, the text outlines what it calls 6 windows into reality. These are 6 specific, probing questions that a leadership team should force themselves to answer on a regular basis.
These questions are so clarifying. Let's walk through the framework. Window 1, what did we do? This is the baseline. Just the objective facts, the outputs, the activities completed.
Window 2, who did we serve? This forces a look at demographics. Did we actually reach the vulnerable and marginalized we claim to care about, or did we default to serving the people who are just like us and easy to reach?
Window 3. What changed? What specific observable outcomes emerged from the activity?
Window 4. What did we learn? This requires psychological safety. Where did our strategy fail completely, and what is the actionable lesson we pull from that failure?
Window 5. What is the Spirit exposing? Where is our institutional pride, our collective fear, or our hidden prejudice getting in the way of the work?
And finally, window 6. What should continue? What needs to adapt, and what must stop immediately?
I am deeply struck by that 5th window. What is the Spirit exposing? That is not a question you can answer by looking at a spreadsheet. It requires a hard pause. It requires silence.
The text issues a massive warning here against two specific devastating errors in leadership: data without prayer and prayer without reflection.
If a board of directors just stares at spreadsheets for 2 hours without ever pausing to pray and seek divine guidance, they aren't leading a mission. They're just practicing bureaucracy.
But on the flip side, if a team just sits in a circle, prays passionately, and uses lofty spiritual language without ever actually reflecting on the hard data of their failures, it's just toxic sentimentality masquerading as faith.
The synthesis of data and spiritual reflection is the only path forward. And the text adds one final, crucial guardrail to this evaluation process.
It emphasizes the absolute necessity of bringing external voices into the room.
A leadership team must actively invite local partners, the actual participants of the programs, and even vocal critics to look through those 6 windows with them.
If an organization only ever evaluates itself behind closed doors using its own internal metrics, it will inevitably create an echo chamber that simply reinforces its own blind spot.
You have to possess the courage to ask the very people on the receiving end of your mission if your efforts are actually bearing fruit in their life.
It takes a staggering amount of institutional humility to sit across from a community member and genuinely ask, is the massive program we just spent $1 million on actually helping your family thrive, or is it just making us feel like saviors?
It is an ego-crushing question. But as the text brilliantly notes, that specific discomfort is very often the only doorway to actual truth.
Wow, we have covered an immense, challenging landscape today.
We really have.
We've unpacked the realization that measuring a sacred mission is absolutely not about turning complex human beings into data points on a sleek dashboard.
But we've also learned that it is emphatically not about retreating into a vague, feel-good ambiguity where no one is held accountable for anything.
Real measurement is about having the honest, grounded, and sometimes deeply uncomfortable courage to look at our actual lives. It's about checking to see if our daily actions, the way we spend our budgets, and the way we block out our calendars genuinely align with our deepest stated purposes.
We have journeyed from exposing the illusion of the seduction of vague success to embracing the slow, beautiful, and sometimes painful reality of cultivating enduring generational fruit.
That is the ultimate takeaway. Whether you are a director evaluating a multinational global mission, a volunteer running a local community garden, or simply an individual trying to evaluate your own personal growth and daily habits.
The framework demands you ask yourself a clarifying question. In all my striving, am I just measuring the noise of the leaves, or am I measuring the health of the roots?
Am I measuring the noise or the roots? That is the perfect distillation of everything we've talked about. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final unscripted thought to ponder as you step back into your day.
Okay, let's hear it.
We exist in a modern society that is completely, overwhelmingly obsessed with algorithms, instant optimization, and the desperate pursuit of virality.
Every single app on your smartphone is brilliantly engineered by psychologists to feed you a constant stream of vanity metric.
Exactly. A view, a follower count, a streak. So what would actually happen if we took this deep, ancient fruit over output framework and ruthlessly applied it to our own digital lives?
If you sat down tonight and audited your personal budgets and calendars, meaning your daily screen time, the allocation of your emotional energy, and the focus of your fracturing attention,
What would you find? Would you discover that you are expertly, frantically managing the maintenance of your digital persona while completely starving the actual quiet calling of your real life?
it is a deeply provocative question. It forces us to stop and look down at the treadmill we might not even realize we are running on.
Exactly the point. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this conversation gave you the courage and the tools to see past the noise and start looking for the fruit. We'll catch you next time.